Welcome to Mind Sherlock, where every case challenges your intellect, every clue sharpens your instincts, and every mystery pulls you deeper into the unknown. Grab a seat, stay sharp, and let's unravel the truth together. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Witchwood Manor. Hercule Poirot sat at his breakfast table, neatly spreading marmalade over a slice of toast, when Captain Hastings entered, holding an envelope of heavy parchment. The seal bore an elaborate crest, a sign of old wealth and tradition. "A rather curious letter for you, Poirot," Hastings said, placing it before him. Poirot studied the envelope with interest before delicately slicing it open. His sharp eyes scanned the page, his expression unreadable. "It is from a Lord Alistair Cavendish," he murmured, "a man of considerable fortune and influence." "What does he want?" Hastings asked, sipping his tea. Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the letter. "He claims to be plagued by visions in an antique mirror. He insists that it does not merely reflect, mon ami, but that it reveals truths unseen by the naked eye." Hastings raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Surely you don't believe in that sort of nonsense, Poirot?" Poirot smiled. "It is not a matter of belief, Hastings. A man of such standing would not reach out to Hercule Poirot over mere superstitions. There is something more here, n'est-ce pas?" Hastings sighed. "I suppose this means we're off to the countryside again." Poirot nodded, folding the letter. "Indeed. We shall pay a visit to Witchwood Manor and discover whether this mirror tells the truth, or if a man's fears have been exploited by something far more human." Their journey took them through the rolling countryside, where mist clung to the hills like a spectral veil. The road twisted through dense woodlands, the towering trees arching like silent sentinels. Hastings, comfortably settled in the carriage, glanced at Poirot, who sat upright, fingers steepled, his mind clearly engaged. "This whole business about a haunted mirror, it's absurd, Poirot," Hastings said, shaking his head. "The man is probably just imagining things." "Perhaps," Poirot replied mildly, "and yet he believes it enough to write to me. A man of logic and reason does not fear illusions, unless he has seen something that defies explanation," Hastings scoffed. "Or unless he has an overactive imagination." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Ah, mon ami, we shall see. But I suspect that Witchwood Manor holds more than just a trick of the light." The carriage creaked as it rounded a bend, and ahead, through the thinning mist, the imposing silhouette of Witchwood Manor loomed. A house that seemed to crouch upon the earth, watching, waiting. As they approached, the manor revealed itself in full, a grand yet foreboding estate, its stone facade weathered by time, ivy creeping up its ancient walls. Tall, arched windows stared vacantly across the grounds, their dark interiors holding unseen secrets. A butler, stiff and expressionless, ushered them inside. The air carried the scent of aged wood, faintly tinged with candle wax and something less definable, something old and lingering. The corridors stretched long and shadowed, lined with antique paintings, their subjects watching with silent scrutiny. Ornate candelabras flickered with weak golden light, barely illuminating the dark oak panelling. Hastings shivered. "Charming place," he muttered. Poirot's gaze travelled the length of the hallway. "This house, Hastings, has known many secrets." His fingers trailed lightly over the carved banister. "Secrets which, perhaps, are not yet ready to be revealed." The butler led them to a grand sitting room where a fire crackled in the hearth, doing little to dispel the oppressive gloom. They had barely seated themselves when the heavy doors swung open and Lord Alistair Cavendish entered, a man pale and drawn, his sharp eyes darting nervously about the room. "You came," he breathed, relief evident in his voice. "Monsieur Poirot, you must help me. The mirror, it shows things that cannot be." Before Poirot could respond, others entered the room, their presence commanding attention. First was Lady Eleanor Cavendish, regal and composed, her dark eyes betraying no emotion. She sank into an armchair, adjusting the silk folds of her dress with practiced ease. My husband has troubled you with his paranoia, Monsieur Poirot, she said coolly. I apologize on his behalf. Lord Cavendish flinched but said nothing. Next came Simon Cavendish, their nephew, a young man of easy charm, his smile tinged with mischief. A haunted mirror, is it? He said lightly. I do hope you can put my uncle's fears to rest, Poirot. This whole business is most tedious. Poirot regarded him with interest. You do not share his concerns, monsieur? Simon smirked. Oh, I am quite certain the only ghosts in this house are the ones my uncle imagines. A woman in a crisp black dress stepped forward, Dr. Beatrice Langley, the family physician. Lord Cavendish's health has been declining for some time, she said in clipped tones. I have advised him to rest, but he refuses. Now he is convinced that a mirror is haunting him. She adjusted her glasses. You are, of course, free to investigate, but I assure you, Poirot, this is a matter of the mind, not reality. Behind them, a tall man shifted uneasily, Charles Winthrop, the estate manager. The mirror is old, he muttered. Older than the house itself. It has a history, one that is better left undisturbed, Lady Eleanor scoffed. Superstitions, Mr. Winthrop? Really? Poirot's gaze lingered on the final figure in the room, a young maid with wide, frightened eyes. Madeleine Vernier stood near the doorway, wringing her hands. You are afraid, mademoiselle? Poirot asked gently. Madeleine hesitated before whispering, The mirror. It sees things, Monsieur Poirot. For the first time that evening, silence fell upon the room. Lord Alistair Cavendish leaned forward in his chair, fingers tightly clasped, his face gaunt and weary. The firelight flickered against the ornate frame of the Venetian mirror standing tall in the corner of the room, its glass reflecting more than just the present moment. That mirror, he murmured, his voice hoarse, was not always mine. It was brought to Witchwood Manor generations ago, from Venice, a relic of an old aristocratic family, the De Lorenzos. Legend says that the last owner died in front of it, staring into his own reflection, whispering of a shadow that was not his own. Hastings scoffed. Surely just a tale, Lord Cavendish. The old man's eyes flickered toward the mirror. Would that it were. But I have seen it myself. It does not always show what it ought to. Last night I stood before it, and behind me there was a figure watching me. Yet when I turned, there was no one there. His voice dropped to a whisper. It is not merely an object of glass and silver, Monsieur Poirot. It is a witness. It knows things. It sees things. Poirot studied the mirror, his fingers resting against his chin. A most intriguing tale, mon cher. And yet legends are so often built on fragments of truth twisted over time. The question is, what truth lies behind this mirror's reflection? Poirot rose and approached the mirror, his sharp gaze sweeping over its surface. A long, jagged crack marred the corner of the otherwise pristine glass, an imperfection amidst its craftsmanship. Curious, he murmured, running a fingertip along the fracture. Such an imperfection. Surely it did not always exist. No, Lord Cavendish admitted, his voice distant. It appeared a fortnight ago. I cannot say how. Poirot's eyes flicked toward Madeleine Vernier, who stood near the doorway, her pale hands twisting the hem of her apron. She refused to meet his gaze. Mademoiselle, Poirot said softly, this mirror, it frightens you, does it not? The young woman swallowed hard, then nodded, almost imperceptibly. It is unnatural, she whispered. Poirot said nothing, but his mind catalogued the details. A mirror that cracked without explanation, a man gripped by fear, and a servant girl too afraid to speak openly. Clues laid bare for those with the eyes to see. Lady Eleanor gave an elegant scoff, reclining in her chair. Alistair has become obsessed, Monsieur Poirot. I fear his mind is unwell. Simon Cavendish chuckled, swirling the brandy in his glass. A haunted mirror. It's rather theatrical, isn't it? Indeed, Dr. Langley interjected, adjusting her glasses. The mind plays tricks in moments of stress. Lord Cavendish's paranoia is nothing more than an overactive imagination. Poirot's gaze swept across the room. Some dismissed the fears outright, while others avoided speaking of the mirror at all. An interesting contrast, n'est-ce pas? But one thing was clear. Fear resided within this house. And fear, Poirot knew, was never without cause. The night was deep and still when the scream rang out, a chilling cry that cut through the silence like a blade. Poirot and Hastings bolted upright in their rooms. Without a word, they hurried down the dimly lit corridors, the air thick with tension. The library doors stood ajar. Inside, Lord Cavendish lay sprawled before the mirror, his throat slit, his lifeless eyes reflecting back at them in the glass. No weapon, no sign of forced entry. Poirot's gaze shifted to the mirror. The crack in the glass had grown, and in its reflection, for just a fleeting moment, Poirot could have sworn he saw a shadow move. Chapter 2. The Locked Room Puzzle. The heavy oak doors of the library stood firm, locked from the inside. Poirot studied them for a moment before pressing his ear against the wood. The silence within was absolute. Mon Dieu, he murmured. Locked. But from within, that is most inconvenient. Hastings rapped against the door. Stand back. We must break it open. The butler, his face drained of colour, fetched a heavy candlestick and, with great effort, forced the door ajar. The sight within froze them all. Lord Alistair Cavendish knelt before the Venetian mirror. His head bowed, his throat slit cleanly from ear to ear. A pool of blood spread beneath him, dark and gleaming against the polished floor. Hastings exhaled sharply. Good heavens! Poirot stepped forward, his sharp gaze moving across the room. The windows were shut, the only door locked, a classic locked room mystery. There is no sign of forced entry, Hastings whispered. Poirot crouched beside the body. And yet, mon ami, Lord Cavendish is quite dead. The question is not how someone entered, but how they left. He turned his gaze to the mirror. The crack in its glass seemed more pronounced now, jagged like a wound. Poirot straightened. This is no ordinary murder, Hastings. No, this is a game, one of illusion and deception. Poirot moved toward the mirror, his keen eyes narrowing as he examined its surface. The crack that had once been no more than a faint imperfection now stretched further, splitting the glass like lightning frozen mid-strike. Hastings furrowed his brow. That's odd. No one touched it, did they? No, Poirot murmured. And yet, it has changed. He pressed a gloved hand against the glass, tracing the jagged line. There is something unnatural about this mirror, mon ami. Either it is reacting to something, or it is being used to conceal the truth. Hastings shuddered. I don't like this, Poirot. The whole thing feels unsettling. Poirot tilted his head. It is unsettling because it does not yet make sense. But all things, Hastings, can be explained, even the impossible. He turned from the mirror, his gaze landing on the surrounding room. Come, let us see what our dear Lord Cavendish has left behind. Poirot crouched near the fireplace, his fingers plucking a small, burnt matchstick from the hearth. He rolled it between his fingertips, eyes alight with calculation. Curious, he mused. Hastings peered over his shoulder. A matchstick. Could be nothing, Poirot. Ah, Hastings, Poirot smiled. But in a case where nothing makes sense, even the smallest thing must be considered. His eyes drifted to the rug, where a small bloodstain lay, separate from the body. He pointed. Regardez. Blood, but not in the expected place. Why is it not pooled with the rest? Unless, of course, the body was moved. Hastings paled. Moved? But how? The doors were locked. Poirot only smiled. Indeed. And yet, it was moved. A soft voice interrupted them. Madeleine Vernier, the maid, stood hesitantly at the threshold, her hands twisting in her apron. I heard whispers, she whispered. Before the scream, soft, like someone speaking, no, arguing, in low voices. Poirot's expression darkened. Whispers, Mademoiselle Vernier. And yet, when we arrived, Lord Cavendish was alone. So I ask you, who was he speaking to? The maid trembled, but said nothing. Poirot stood. The pieces are scattered, Hastings. Now, let us see who fits them together incorrectly. Simon Cavendish was the first to break the silence. Well, isn't it obvious? He turned to the others, voice sharp. Charles Winthrop. He had access to the estate, knew every corner of it. And let's not forget, the old man planned to change his will, wasn't he? Charles Winthrop, the estate manager, stiffened. That is untrue. Lady Eleanor sighed. Oh, do stop dramatizing, Simon. No one killed Alistair for his money. If anyone had cause, it was you. How much do you owe in gambling debts precisely? Simon's jaw tightened. I had no reason to kill him. He paid them off, didn't he? Poirot raised a hand. Enough. If we throw accusations like confetti, we shall be buried in them. Lady Eleanor, I understand you claim to have been in your room at the time of the murder. She nodded. I was. Ask anyone. Poirot turned to Madeleine Vernier. And yet, Mademoiselle Vernier, you saw someone walking the halls, did you not? The maid hesitated. I saw Lady Eleanor, Monsieur Poirot, near the library, but it was late, and I may have been mistaken. A flicker of something passed over Lady Eleanor's face before she regained her composure. So now the words of a mere servant dictate suspicion? Poirot's smile was knowing. Madame, in my experience, it is often those dismissed who hold the greatest truths. Dr. Beatrice Langley folded her arms, her expression sharp and clinical. This is a tragedy, of course, she said, adjusting her spectacles. But I must be frank, Monsieur Poirot. Lord Cavendish was not a well man. Poirot regarded her with quiet amusement. Ah, doctor, you suspect his demise was a mere failure of the heart, n'est-ce pas? Dr. Langley nodded. Precisely. He had suffered from spells of dizziness, anxiety. His obsession with that mirror, his insistence that it was haunting him, was symptomatic of a deteriorating mind. Hastings frowned. But his throat, a post-mortem wound, she interjected smoothly, possibly self-inflicted in a final fit of delirium. There was a pause. Then Poirot sighed. Ah, Dr. Langley, your logic is admirable, but your theory, it is not quite satisfying. Dr. Langley stiffened. Why not? Poirot gestured toward the body. Because, madame, he was on his knees when he died. Does that seem like the position of a man in his final moments of delirium? Dr. Langley hesitated for just a moment, too long for Poirot's liking. Poirot moved with purpose, kneeling beside the body of Lord Cavendish. The old man's face was frozen in an expression of something more than pain. There was an air of reverence, of submission. His hands were limp at his sides, as if he had once clasped them together in supplication. Poirot traced a finger along the polished floorboards, noting the way the blood had pooled. He pressed his palm lightly against the surface. Still warm, he murmured. He was alive not long before we arrived. Hastings shifted uncomfortably. But why would he kneel, Poirot? It makes no sense. Poirot tapped his temple. And yet, mon ami, nothing about this murder makes sense. Yet. His eyes flickered toward the mirror once more. The positioning of the body, the direction of the blood spatter. It all centered around that cursed reflection. Poirot whispered, almost to himself. Was he kneeling in fear or in worship? A chill ran through Hastings. Poirot, what are you saying? Poirot stood abruptly. I am saying that this murder, it was a performance, and our dear Lord Cavendish was forced into his final act. Poirot's gaze snapped to the Venetian mirror, his expression darkening. With deliberate steps, he approached the tall, ornate glass, its fractured corner jagged and ominous. He lifted a handkerchief from his pocket and ran it lightly across the surface. Then, with great satisfaction, He held it up. The pristine white fabric had not a speck of dust upon it. Ah, Poirot murmured. Très intéressant. Hastings frowned. What is? Poirot turned, his voice calm, yet edged with meaning. This house is old, mon ami. Everything here carries the weight of dust, of time. And yet this mirror, it has been wiped clean. Dr. Langley scoffed. Perhaps someone simply dusted it, Poirot. Is that a crime now? Poirot's gaze sharpened. Dusting? Perhaps. But tell me, Doctor, what is it that one seeks to remove from a surface after a murder? Dr. Langley's lips thinned, but she said nothing. Poirot stepped back, eyes never leaving the mirror. Non, non, non. This was not dusting. This was erasing. The question is, what was here before? Poirot stood before the mirror, his expression unreadable. The crack in the glass, it had grown once more. Hastings shifted beside him. What are you thinking, Poirot? Poirot did not answer at first. Instead, he reached out, letting his fingertips graze the cold surface. His own reflection gazed back at him, fragmented by the crack. Then, at last, he spoke. Mon ami, he murmured, the mirror does not lie, but it may be used to deceive. The words hung in the air, thick with implication. Somewhere behind them, Madeleine Vernier gasped, and in the silence that followed, the mirror stood, watching, waiting, knowing. Chapter 3. The Shadow in the Mirror. Sleep did not come easily at Witchwood Manor. The house, heavy with silence, seemed to hold its breath in the dark. Hastings lay in bed, restless, his thoughts circling the events of the evening, the locked room, the unnatural position of the body, and Poirot's ominous words. It all felt like something out of a Gothic tale. Unable to shake the unease, he rose and stepped into the corridor. The candle in his hand flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. The stillness of the house only deepened his discomfort. Then, as he passed the library door, something caught his eye. The Venetian mirror stood within, its polished surface reflecting the dim corridor, and in it a figure, a shadow, standing motionless. Hastings turned sharply, his heart hammering. But when he faced the room directly, there was nothing there. He swallowed hard and stepped forward. The mirror stared back, empty now, save for his own pale reflection. Just a trick of the light, he muttered to himself. Yet as he turned away, he could not shake the cold sensation that someone, or something, had been watching him. The next morning, the household gathered in the drawing room under Poirot's watchful eye. A fire burned low in the grate, though it did little to dispel the chill in the air. Poirot stood, hands clasped, surveying the faces before him. Mes amis, the events of last night weigh heavily upon us all. A man is dead, murdered. And yet, I sense in this house a great reluctance to speak the truth. His gaze fell upon Simon Cavendish, who lounged carelessly in an armchair. Monsieur, you were quick to dismiss your uncle's fears. Tell me, where were you on the night of his death? Simon smirked. In my room, sleeping off an excellent bottle of brandy. You're welcome to check the decanter, Poirot. Poirot's moustache twitched. Ah, but brandy does not answer questions. You say you slept, but who can verify? Simon shrugged. No one. But then, I doubt anyone can verify their own whereabouts at that hour. Poirot turned to Lady Eleanor, her expression composed but distant. And you, madame? A maid claims to have seen you walking the halls. She exhaled slowly. I could not sleep. The house was restless. I walked, yes, but not near the library. Poirot's gaze did not waver. You are certain? She lifted her chin. Quite. Poirot nodded, then turned his attention to Dr. Langley. And you, Doctor, who assured us that Lord Cavendish's death was natural? Dr. Langley's lips thinned. I still believe his paranoia contributed to his end. A man who sees ghosts in mirrors is already half in his grave. Poirot leaned forward. And yet, Doctor, I wonder, was he seeing ghosts, or something very real? A heavy silence followed. Poirot's eyes flicked toward Madeleine Vernier, standing near the door, pale and uneasy. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "there is something you have not told us. It is time." She hesitated, her hands trembling. Then, at last, she spoke. "I should not speak of it," Madeleine whispered, her voice barely audible. Poirot's tone was gentle but firm. "And yet, you must." She took a shuddering breath. "2 nights before his death, Lord Cavendish had a terrible argument. I heard raised voices from the library, but I dared not enter." Hastings leaned forward. "Who was he arguing with?" Madeleine hesitated. "I do not know." Poirot tilted his head. "Ah, but you suspect." She looked away. "Perhaps." Poirot watched her carefully. "Tell me, mademoiselle, did Lord Cavendish seem afraid afterward?" She nodded, her hands twisting in her apron. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. More than afraid. He locked himself in the library that night and refused to come out until morning." Poirot's expression did not change, but Hastings saw the sharp glint in his eye. "And yet, the night of his murder, he was found kneeling before the mirror." Madeleine swallowed. "Yes." Poirot murmured, almost to himself. Then what changed, I wonder? What convinced him to face what he most feared? Madeleine had no answer, but Poirot already suspected one was coming. Poirot steepled his fingers. "Mademoiselle, you have given us much to consider. But tell me, when Lord Cavendish locked himself in the library 2 nights ago, how did he leave?" Madeleine hesitated. "With his key, of course." Poirot nodded. "And where is that key now?" A hush fell over the room. Hastings blinked. "You mean the key is missing?" Poirot turned to Charles Winthrop, the estate manager. "Monsieur, you oversee the house. Have any keys gone astray?" Winthrop frowned. "Not that I know of, but if his personal key is missing..." His face darkened. "That means someone took it." Poirot's voice was soft but certain. "Indeed. And whoever holds that key holds the truth." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back. "The question is, what did Lord Cavendish lock away that night, and why did someone ensure he would never speak of it?" A silence settled over them all, heavy with possibility. Poirot stood before the Venetian mirror, his keen eyes tracing its intricate golden frame. His fingertips brushed the carved patterns along its edges, pausing over the crack in the glass, as if listening to the story it wished to tell. "There is something more to this mirror, mon ami," he murmured. "Something hidden in plain sight." Hastings frowned. "What do you mean, Poirot?" Poirot pressed his palm flat against the lower edge of the mirror, then along the side. His expression sharpened. "A most curious design, ornate, yet with a precision that suggests function rather than mere decoration." He stepped back, regarding the mirror from a different angle. "Do you not see, Hastings? The frame is not uniform. One section is slightly raised." Hastings leaned in, squinting. "Now that you mention it..." Poirot turned to Charles Winthrop, the estate manager. "Monsieur, has this mirror ever been taken down, examined closely?" Winthrop hesitated. "Not in my time, no. Lord Cavendish forbade it." Poirot gave a small smile. And yet, he was not afraid of the mirror. He was afraid of what it might reveal. A heavy silence followed. Poirot stepped away, dusting off his hands. "This mirror is not merely an object of superstition, my friends. It is a hiding place." Poirot turned sharply to Lady Eleanor. "Madame, we must speak of something most delicate." She arched a perfect brow. "Indeed?" Poirot nodded. "A purchase made recently. A vial of poison." The air in the room shifted. Lady Eleanor remained poised, though a flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. "And what of it?" Hastings gaped. "You admit it?" She gave a cool smile. "Why should I not? I am not in the habit of hiding my affairs. It was for a matter of pest control. Poirot folded his arms. And yet, one might wonder, was it for rats, madame, or for something rather more personal? Her fingers tensed around the armrest of her chair. You are implying that I poisoned my husband? Poirot's voice remained calm. Not at all, madame. I am merely stating a fact. Lord Cavendish was already in fear for his life. If he suspected poison, it would be most troubling indeed for him to learn that you had procured such a substance. Lady Eleanor's lips pressed together, but she did not reply. Poirot glanced at the others. It is not only the dead who speak, mes amis. The actions of the living, they tell a story too. Simon Cavendish let out an exaggerated sigh, throwing up his hands. Really, Poirot, all this fuss over a mirror, and now poison. My uncle was a madman, nothing more. The whole household knew it. Poirot tilted his head. And yet, monsieur, madmen do not lock themselves away in terror. Simon scoffed. He was delusional. This mirror nonsense, seeing things that weren't there. Hastings himself just admitted to imagining a shadow in the glass. Perhaps he too is falling under the house's spell. Hastings stiffened. I know what I saw, Cavendish. Dr. Langley folded her arms. With all due respect, Captain Hastings, the mind plays tricks, especially when primed for fear. Lord Cavendish was growing increasingly unstable. It is not impossible that, in his final moments, his delusions became unbearable. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, yes, a most convenient explanation. Dr. Langley's gaze sharpened. Do you have a better one, Poirot? His voice was quiet but firm. I do. But first, we must see what the mirror has been hiding. Poirot called for darkness. Candles were lit, their flames dancing weakly against the walls. The Venetian mirror stood tall, its cracked surface reflecting the flickering glow. Poirot adjusted the candlelight, angling the flames. The glass distorted, bending the reflections, revealing shapes, shadows, things unseen in full light. Hastings inhaled sharply. Good heavens! The others shifted uneasily. The mirror, under this illumination, seemed to hold depth beyond its glass. And then, there, a faint shimmer along its frame. Poirot's hand shot forward, pressing against a panel on the side. A soft click. The frame shifted, revealing a hidden compartment. Gasps filled the room. Within the hollow space, wrapped in aged velvet, lay a small, ornate key. Poirot plucked it from its resting place, holding it up for all to see. Mes amis, I believe we have just found the key to everything. And for the first time, true fear flickered in the eyes of one of the suspects. Chapter 4. A Game of Illusions. The gathered household watched in silence as Poirot stood before the Venetian mirror, his hands folded neatly before him. His eyes, sharp as ever, gleamed with satisfaction. Mes amis, he began, his voice calm yet commanding. This mirror has been the center of fear, superstition, and deception. But I tell you this, it is not haunted. It does not reveal hidden truths. No, no. Instead, it has been used as a tool of misdirection. Simon Cavendish scoffed. A trick mirror? Really, Poirot? Poirot raised a finger. Ah, not in the way you imagine, monsieur, but observe. He adjusted the angle of a nearby candelabra. The flickering light bent in the reflection, distorting the image ever so slightly. Poirot gestured toward the shifting shadows. You see? With the right positioning, this mirror can obscure what is real and create what is not. Hastings leaned forward. You mean, it could have made someone appear to be in the room, when they weren't? Poirot smiled. Exactement. He turned to Lady Eleanor. Madame, you were seen near the library that night, yet you claim you were elsewhere. But what if your reflection was seen, rather than you yourself? A hush fell over the room. Poirot continued. And more importantly, what if the murderer used this very deception to confuse Lord Cavendish before striking? A ripple of unease passed through the group. The mirror no longer seemed like an innocent object. It was now a silent accomplice in a carefully constructed illusion. Poirot turned his attention to the details of the crime scene. His feet moved deliberately, tracing an invisible path around the library. There are two things, mes amis, that do not fit with the story we have been told. He crouched and gestured to the small, misplaced bloodstain on the carpet. Why is this here, separate from the main pool of blood? Poirot asked. Unless, of course, the body was moved. Hastings's eyes widened. Moved? But how? The doors were locked from the inside. Poirot tapped his temple. Precisely, which tells us something very important. The killer was inside the room when Lord Cavendish died. The group exchanged uneasy glances. Poirot walked toward the fireplace, plucking the burnt matchstick from its resting place. And then there is this. A small thing, yes. But small things, Hastings, they speak volumes. Someone lit a match in this room, but for what purpose? Winthrop, the estate manager, frowned. To light a candle, perhaps. Poirot shook his head. Non, non. To create a momentary burst of light. He turned to the others. Imagine, if Lord Cavendish stood before the mirror in the dim glow of the fire, and suddenly, a match is struck behind him. He would see something in the reflection that was not truly there. A shiver passed through Madeleine Vernier. He thought he was seeing a ghost. Poirot nodded. And in that moment of terror, the murderer struck. Poirot stepped back toward the mirror, fingers tracing the hidden compartment they had discovered the night before. With a deft motion, he reached inside. What do we have here? He carefully pulled out a folded letter, its parchment aged and brittle. Lord Cavendish's signature was scrawled at the bottom. Poirot unfolded the note and began to read aloud. I am being watched. I do not know who I can trust anymore. My food tastes strange. My hands shake. They tell me I am unwell, but I know better. Someone is trying to poison me. The mirror. Poirot's voice slowed as he reached the final words. The mirror knows the truth. The room was deathly silent. Poirot lifted his gaze. Mes amis, this was not a man suffering from madness. This was a man who knew he was being hunted. Dr. Langley, her expression unreadable, interjected. This could be the ramblings of a paranoid mind, a dying man grasping at shadows. Poirot fixed her with an unwavering stare. Or it could be the final words of a man who saw his killer's reflection before he died. Dr. Langley's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Poirot folded the letter carefully. One thing is now certain. Lord Cavendish did not die by accident. He did not die by madness. He was murdered, and he knew it was coming. Poirot turned back to the mirror's hidden compartment, reaching inside once more. His fingers closed around something small and cold. With deliberate slowness, he withdrew a brass key. The missing key, he murmured. Winthrop stiffened. That's Lord Cavendish's library key. Poirot turned it over in his palm. Indeed. And yet, was it not missing? He looked up. We believed the killer had taken it. But no, it was hidden here. Hastings frowned. But why? If the murderer locked the doors, wouldn't they have kept the key? Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, Hastings, you think like an honest man. But let me propose another theory. What if the key was hidden so we would believe the door was locked all along? Hastings blinked. You mean, it wasn't? Poirot gestured toward the key. If this key was inside the mirror's compartment, then the door could not have been locked from within when we arrived. The implication struck like a thunderclap. Simon Cavendish spoke first, his voice strained. You're saying the murderer locked the door after the fact? Poirot inclined his head. Exactly. The locked room was not an impossibility, it was an illusion. A heavy silence followed, each suspect glancing at the other, fear creeping into their eyes. Poirot held up the key. And now, Mes amis, the final act begins. Poirot turned, his gaze settling on Lady Eleanor with quiet finality. Madame, there is something you have not yet told us. She met his eyes coolly. I fail to see what more there is to say. Poirot smiled faintly. But of course, and yet, when we believe we have said all there is to say, that is often the moment when the truth remains unspoken. She gave a slight sigh, exasperation flickering in her expression. Poirot, I have no knowledge of my husband's death, nor of his ridiculous superstitions. I suggest you look elsewhere. Poirot's fingers drummed lightly against the arm of his chair. You see, madame, I have been thinking. You were seen near the library on the night of the murder, something you denied. You purchased poison, something you claimed was merely for pests. And yet, when I consider these things, I find myself wondering, were you truly afraid of your husband? Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, but she did not reply. Poirot leaned forward. Or were you afraid of something else? The silence stretched unbearably before, at last, she spoke. My husband and I had not shared a life in many years, Poirot. I stayed in this house because it was expected of me, but I had no desire to see him dead. Poirot's gaze did not waver. And yet, you had a reason to keep secrets, madame. She exhaled sharply. Yes, I was seeing someone. Charles Winthrop's gasps rippled through the room. Winthrop, pale but composed, stepped forward. It's true, Poirot nodded. A scandalous secret indeed, but not, I think, a reason for murder. Lady Eleanor lifted her chin. And now that you know, Monsieur Poirot, will you finally stop wasting my time? Poirot only smiled. Madame, I waste no time, and neither does a murderer. Poirot rose, stepping toward the Venetian mirror once more. Mes amis, this mirror is the key to everything. It has done more than reflect mere images. It has reflected lies. He turned to the household. When we first examined the crime scene, it seemed impossible. A locked room, a man kneeling before his own reflection, a murder without a visible killer. His hand rested lightly on the gilded frame. And yet, we now know that the mirror was not merely an object in the room. It was a tool, used to deceive both Lord Cavendish and us. He glanced at Hastings. Mon ami, do you recall your vision in the mirror? The shadowy figure? Hastings nodded stiffly. Yes, of course. But it was just a trick of the light, wasn't it? Poirot's smile was grim. No, Hastings. It was a trick of the murderer. The mirror was angled just so, creating the illusion of something that was not there. His voice dropped lower. And if it could create a false presence, then it could also create a false absence. He turned back to the others, his expression razor-sharp. And that, mes amis, is how our killer concealed themselves. The household assembled in the grand sitting room, the air thick with anticipation. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows as Poirot took his place at the centre, his gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. Mes amis, we have reached the final act. A hush fell over the room. Poirot folded his hands behind his back. Lord Cavendish was not a man haunted by ghosts. He was a man haunted by the truth, and it was the truth that killed him. His voice rang clear, every word deliberate. He was poisoned, but the dose was slow, calculated. He suspected this, and so he sought proof. And when he found it, he was silenced. His eyes met each suspect in turn. The mirror was used to create an illusion, to mislead his eyes at the final moment. And when his killer struck, it was not a crime of passion. No. It was planned to perfection. Poirot's moustache twitched ever so slightly. But perfection, mes amis, is a fragile thing, and tonight it shatters. He took a breath. The murderer of Lord Cavendish is in this room. A tense silence gripped the household. Someone shifted uneasily. Poirot straightened, his voice calm and unwavering. And now, mes amis, it is time for the truth. Chapter 5. The Truth Revealed. The grand hall of Witchwood Manor was deathly silent. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting long shadows upon the walls as the household gathered at Poirot's command. He stood at the centre of the room, hands clasped neatly, his sharp gaze scanning the faces before him. "Mes amis," he began, his voice calm but deliberate. "Tonight, we bring an end to the mystery that has haunted this house. Lord Cavendish was murdered, and his killer stands among us." A hush fell over the room. Simon Cavendish scoffed. "Well, Poirot, if you know who it is, don't keep us waiting." Poirot smiled faintly. "Patience, Monsieur Cavendish. The truth, it is delicate. It must be unravelled carefully, lest we disturb its fragile strands." His moustache twitched as he turned toward the Venetian mirror, standing tall and ominous in the corner of the hall. This mirror, it has been the centre of fear and superstition. But I tell you, it was not an instrument of the supernatural. It was a tool of deception. Lady Eleanor folded her arms. "You keep speaking in riddles, Poirot." Poirot inclined his head. "Then let me show you how a murderer used illusion to commit the perfect crime." Poirot gestured toward the mirror. "Mes amis, let us recall the events of that night. Lord Cavendish was found kneeling before this very mirror, his throat slit, seemingly alone in a locked room. Impossible, non?" He glanced at Hastings. "And yet, mon ami, did we not see that this mirror could alter what was visible, distorting reality?" Hastings nodded slowly. "You mean, the murderer used the mirror to make it seem like they weren't in the room?" "Exactement," Poirot said. "By carefully angling the mirror, the murderer created an illusion, making themselves invisible to Lord Cavendish while still being in the room." Dr. Langley scoffed. "That's absurd, Poirot." Poirot's expression sharpened. "Is it? Consider this. Lord Cavendish saw something in the mirror that terrified him. He was kneeling, not in worship, but in submission. Why? Because he believed he was seeing a ghost." Simon's brow furrowed. "But it wasn't a ghost. It was—" Poirot nodded. "His killer." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Poirot continued, his voice steady. "The murderer positioned themselves carefully, using the mirror to obscure their true presence. Lord Cavendish believed he was alone, but in reality, his killer was standing just out of sight, hidden by the mirror's deceptive reflection." His voice dropped lower, tension thick in the air. And when the moment was right, they struck. A collective breath seemed to catch in the room. The illusion had been masterfully planned, but Poirot had unravelled it. And now, there was one final truth left to reveal. Poirot took a step forward, his sharp eyes locking onto Dr. Beatrice Langley. "Doctor," he said softly, "you were quick to suggest that Lord Cavendish suffered from paranoia, that his fears were delusions." Dr. Langley's expression remained carefully neutral. "Because they were." Poirot's gaze did not waver. "Were they?" He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small vial. "This, mes amis, was found in Lord Cavendish's private study. A trace of poison was detected in his wine. A slow, carefully administered dose, just enough to make him feel as though he were losing his mind." A murmur of shock swept through the room. Poirot's voice was sharp now. Lord Cavendish was being poisoned long before he was murdered. His trembling hands, his hallucinations, his growing paranoia, they were not the symptoms of madness. They were the symptoms of a carefully administered poison. Simon paled. "You mean someone was driving him insane on purpose?" Poirot nodded. "Exactement. And when Lord Cavendish began to suspect, he took precautions. He wrote his fears in a letter we found hidden behind the mirror." Poirot turned back to Dr. Langley, his voice calm but final. "Doctor, you alone had access to his medications. You dismissed his fears, persuading everyone that he was simply delusional. But in truth, you were ensuring that no one would believe him, until it was too late." Dr. Langley's face remained composed, but Poirot saw the slight tightening of her jaw. Poirot took another step forward. You did not kill him in a fit of rage, Dr. Langley. You planned his death meticulously, but there was one thing you did not account for. A pause. Then Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. The mirror told the truth. Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. And then, Dr. Langley's mask finally cracked. Dr. Beatrice Langley remained motionless, her gloved hands resting on the arms of her chair. Her face, usually composed, bore the faintest trace of tension. Poirot stepped forward, his voice calm but unwavering. Doctor, you have played a most intelligent game. You poisoned Lord Cavendish slowly, convincing all that his mind was failing, that he was losing touch with reality. You made us believe that he died in delusion. She lifted her chin. That is an absurd accusation. Non, madam, Poirot continued. It is the truth, and it is the mirror that proves it. The others watched in breathless silence. Poirot gestured toward the Venetian mirror, standing tall in the dimly lit hall. This mirror did not haunt Lord Cavendish, but rather it revealed something he was not meant to see. That is why he feared it, and that is why you used it against him. Dr. Langley scoffed. Used it? How? Poirot's moustache twitched. You positioned yourself where the mirror's angle would hide your presence. He saw only his own reflection until, at the precise moment, you stepped forward. A murmur rippled through the room. Poirot's voice softened, almost pitying. He believed he saw a spectre, non? But no, it was his murderer. In that moment of horror, he did not fight back, and you, Doctor, took advantage of his terror to end his life. Silence. Then a sharp breath from Lady Eleanor. Poirot's gaze locked onto Dr. Langley. But you made one mistake. Dr. Langley's jaw clenched. And what was that, Poirot? He held up the hidden letter from behind the mirror. You underestimated his clarity in his final hours. He knew you were coming for him. Dr. Langley's mask did not crack, but Poirot saw the slight tremor in her hands. Simon Cavendish leaned forward. Why would she do it? Poirot turned to him. A question, monsieur, that has two answers. One, the logical, and one, the human. He folded his hands behind his back. Dr. Langley was Lord Cavendish's personal physician. She knew his weaknesses, his illnesses, his fears, and she exploited them. Charles Winthrop frowned. But why? Poirot sighed. Because his death benefited her. He gestured toward the estate manager. Monsieur Winthrop, tell me, what was to happen to Lord Cavendish's estate upon his death? Winthrop hesitated. His will named multiple beneficiaries, but if he had died by natural causes, Dr. Langley would have inherited a considerable sum for her years of service. A sharp intake of breath from Madeleine Vernier. She was counting on his death. Poirot nodded. But there is more. She knew that poisoning alone would raise suspicion, so she staged an elaborate murder to mislead us all. Dr. Langley exhaled slowly, then tilted her head. You seem so certain, Poirot. But tell me this. Where is your proof? Poirot smiled. The proof, madame, is in what you tried so hard to erase. Poirot stepped toward the mirror, his fingers tracing the aged frame. His voice, though soft, held absolute conviction. Madame Langley, you attempted to cover your crime with an illusion. You manipulated the mirror's reflection, wiped it clean of any trace, and staged a scene to mislead us. His gaze sharpened. But the truth, it cannot be erased so easily. He gestured to the others. This house has been plagued by fear, not of ghosts, but of deception. It is always so, mes amis. The mind fills in the gaps where logic is absent. Dr. Langley remained silent. The others, watching her, saw what Poirot had seen all along. Her mask was cracking. Poirot turned back to the household. Lord Cavendish feared this mirror because, despite its distortions, it revealed what he most wished to ignore. And in the end, it revealed his murderer. A pause. Then, Poirot murmured his final words. The mirror told the truth, if only one had the eyes to see. Silence fell over Witchwood Manor. And then, at last, Dr. Beatrice Langley let out a long breath and closed her eyes. She had lost. Thank you for tuning in to Mind Sherlock. If you enjoyed this mind-bending mystery, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated on more thrilling detective adventures. Your support keeps the stories flowing and the mysteries unraveling. We'd love to hear your thoughts. How did you find this story? If you have any suggestions or theories, feel free to share them in the comments below. Your input keeps the mystery alive.